Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Brazil has reported record new cases of COVID-19 as over 67,000 tested positive, while Argentina recorded 5,782 cases. The United States continues to be the worst hit with more than 3.9 million cases and over 143,000 deaths. In Pakistan, 32 more people lost their lives and 1,763 tested positive overnight. The death toll has risen to 5,709 and the cases have crossed 269,000. Globally, more than 622,000 people have died from the virus and over 15.1 million infected. The United States says it's deeply concerned over escalation in violence and civilian casualties in Afghanistan. Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, urged Kabul and the Taliban to show necessary restraint ahead of the intra-Afghan negotiations. This comes as 45 people, including civilians and Taliban fighters, were killed in government airstrikes in Herat province. Ukrainian forces and the self-proclaimed Donetsk People Republic have reached a ceasefire agreement on the eastern border region of Donbass. After a virtual meeting of the Trilateral Contact Group, the DPR's foreign ministry said corresponding orders will come into force on July 27. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has hailed the pact, calling it the fruit of rigorous negotiations with the pro-Russian separatists. China has successfully launched an unmanned probe to Mars in its first independent mission to another planet. China's Long March Y-54 carrier rocket blasted off with the probe from Wenchang Space Launch Center on the southern island of Hainan. And in football, English champions Liverpool beat Chelsea by 5-3 in an 8-goal thriller at Anfield to cap an entire league season unbeaten at home. Injured Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson lifted the EPL trophy in a closed ceremony after the match in front of an empty cup. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Brazil has reported record new cases of COVID-19 as over 67,000 tested positive, while Argentina recorded 5,782 cases. The United States continues to be the worst hit with more than 3.9 million cases and over 143,000 deaths. Globally, more than 622,000 people have died from the virus and over 15.1 million infected. More details in this report.
The surge in new coronavirus cases around the world has stalled the global push to reopen businesses to avoid economic catastrophe. The disease is setting new grim records in the US, Brazil, Mexico, and now Argentina and Peru. As the virus burns through Latin America like fire, China has offered $1 billion loan to the region's countries to help them buy vaccine when one becomes available. But WHO Program Executive Mike Ryan says the world needs to get over untimely excitement at vaccine news.
We have to be able to look ourselves in the eyes, and we have to be able to look at our communities and assure them that we have taken every precaution to make sure these vaccines are safe and effective before we go giving them to general populations. In order to make that happen, we can shorten that time, but realistically it's going to be the first part of next year before we start seeing people getting vaccinated.
Spain is re-emerging as Europe's hotspot for COVID-19, with the health ministry reporting over 9,000 new infections in the last week alone. The aggressive resurgence of the new coronavirus has now pushed South Korea and Australian economies into recession. Aussie Treasury Minister says the road ahead is extremely challenging.
The impact of the coronavirus has led to a significant decline in tax receipts and a large increase in government payments. This has driven a dramatic change in the budget's position. These harsh numbers reflect the harsh reality we face. The economic outlook remains very uncertain.
China has reported 22 new cases, with 19 being domestically transmitted. South Korea's new daily virus cases are still hovering around 60 for the second straight day, as locally transmitted cases spike due to cluster infections.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 32 deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, raising the total to 5,709. The Health Ministry says 1,763 new cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed 269,000. The ministry said over 213,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. It said there are now over 50,000 active cases in the country, among which 1,382 are critically ill. Sindh is the worst hit province with over 115,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 91,000 cases. In the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, the tally of cases is nearly 32,000, while there are over 11,000 infections in Balochistan. Now, in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, a group of foreign journalists has visited the Poonch sector along the line of control and interacted with the victims of Indian firing from across the line. They also witnessed a three-tier Indian surveillance grid and obstacle system deployed 4 kilometers from the LOC. More about this in this report.
Kashmir is one of the most heavily militarized area on earth, with over 900,000 Indian troops for nearly 8 million people. The situation has intensified after New Delhi stripped the region of its autonomy in August last year and subsequently imposed a curfew. With unrest prevailing there, India has escalated tensions with Pakistan at the line of control to divert the world's attention from their illegal actions. But foreign media correspondents who visited the Pakistani side of line of control took stock of India's ceasefire violations.
We visited today Chiri Court and we met so many victims in that area. I would say here that it was very free for us to meet several people, and we could listen to them. We could listen to their stories as well. Some of them were victims of the Indian shelling on the border.
Small boy, he injured by the bullet on his shoulder. So I feel very sad with this situation.
Ceasefire violations from the Indian side have increased since the BJP government came to power in 2015. According to reports, Indian troops have committed more than 11,800 ceasefire violations since then. The Indian government has repeatedly refused to take foreign delegations to their side of the LOC.
The Nuclear Threat Initiative has ranked Pakistan as the most improved country in nuclear asset security, leaving India behind. In its 2020 Nuclear Security Index, the Global Monitor said Pakistan ranks 33rd, while India is in 38th place in terms of protection of nuclear facilities. The report says Pakistan has improved by adopting new on-site physical protection and cyber security regulations. The NTI said Islamabad also improved inside threat protection. It said Pakistan's security and control measures score increased by 25 points due to actions taken to strengthen its regulations. Pakistan also improved in the global norms category. The monitor said Pakistan's score progress is the second largest improvement for regulations in the index since 2012. The NTI assesses countries' progress on nuclear security, highlights security gaps and recommends factors for improvement. The US says it's deeply concerned over an escalation in violence and civilian casualties in Afghanistan. Special Envoy for Afghanistan Zalmi Khalilzad urged Kabul and the Taliban to show necessary restraint ahead of the intra-Afghan negotiations. Khalilzad said Washington condemns Afghan government airstrikes in eastern Herat province as well as the Taliban's recent raids. This comes as 45 people, including civilians and Taliban fighters, were killed in government airstrikes in Herat province. Tensions between Kabul and the fighters are on the rise again, with both of them targeting each other's posts. Now, Berlin says Washington's threats of withdrawing 9,500 troops from Germany is a cause for NATO concern. Defense Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer said the move will not damage US-German relations but could fracture the alliance. Kramp said the withdrawal of forces will be seen as a major change in American strategy. Last month, US President Donald Trump approved the withdrawal of more than a quarter of its troops from Germany. Trump took the step after accusing Berlin of not contributing to 2% of GDP to NATO's defense budget as mandated by a 2014 agreement. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces and the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic have reached a ceasefire agreement on the eastern border region of Donbass. After a virtual meeting of the Trilateral Contact Group, the DPR's foreign ministry said corresponding orders will come into force on July 27th. The DPR also said all parties have agreed to ban the use of drones and positioning of heavy weapons in the built-up areas to protect civilians. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has hailed the pact, calling it the fruit of rigorous negotiations. The conflict between Ukrainian troops and Russian-backed rebels in Donetsk and Luhansk has killed over 13,000 people since 2014. Moving on, Boko Haram militants have killed 5 aid workers in Nigeria's northeastern state of Borno. In a statement, the human rights group Action Against Hunger said the militants had abducted the workers on 8th of June. Boko Haram circulated the video of the execution-style shooting on social media. In the footage, they warned locals against working for foreigners who they describe as infidels. Boko Haram has been leading violent warfare targeting civilians for more than a decade in the region. Russia says restoration of Libya's territorial integrity is the ultimate goal of a political settlement. At a press conference with his Algerian counterpart Sabri Boukhadoum, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said as long as the Libyans are divided, risk of foreign interference will continue. Lavrov said the situation in Libya demands to bring the warring parties to the negotiating table. He pointed out Russia works with all parties in the conflict as well as the neighboring countries to rebuild the Libyan statehood. For his part, Boukhadoum said political dialogue is the only way to resolve the crisis in Libya. Now, Turkey says one of its ships is set to carry out a seismic survey in the eastern Mediterranean. The move has escalated long-standing tensions with its NATO ally, Greece. Greece accuses Turkey of attempting to encroach on its continental shelf. Ankara insists the eastern Mediterranean region where the ship will carry out the survey is part of Turkey's continental shelf. Tensions between the two countries have revived after the Turkish Navy issued an advisory for seismic surveys in water between the island of Cyprus and Crete. Athens and Ankara are at the odds over claims for hydrocarbon resources. The issue came into focus after Cyprus attempts to explore for natural gas in the eastern Mediterranean despite Turkish objections. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. The United Kingdom's leader of the opposition has pressed Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the Parliament over the government's policy on Russia. The remarks follow a long-awaited report on Moscow's interference in Britain's politics. Speaking in the Parliament, opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer said under his leadership, national security will always be a top priority for the country. He said the government took its eyes off the ball. Starmer said the report was extremely serious and asked Johnson why he delayed publication of the report by 10 months. Hitting back, Johnson said Starmer failed to condemn Russia's 2018 chemical attack in Salisbury, where a former military officer was killed. The Premier said there is no country in the Western world that is more vigilant than the United Kingdom in protecting the interests from Russian interference. Now, the European Union has granted Honduras $93 million in aid to help its national health system amid the coronavirus pandemic. Talking to media, EU's representative to Honduras, Alessandro Palmero, said this aid will be allocated in the areas of health, economy, jobs and human rights. Experts forecast the pandemic will cause the Honduran economy to contract by between 2.9% and 3.9% this year. They say at least 500,000 people in the country will lose their jobs. So far, Honduras has reported over 36,000 COVID-19 infections and 1,006 deaths. United States President Donald Trump has announced a plan to send federal agents to more cities to crack down on violent crime. At a White House event, Trump said he has explained the Operation Legend to Chicago and Albuquerque and New Mexico. The program mandates deploying federal agents to assist local police in combating what the Justice Department says is a surge of violent crime. Democratic officials in Chicago and New Mexico have welcomed the move but voiced concerns about a possible repeat of the crackdown seen in Portland, Oregon. Trump said the measure will end the bloodshed. He urged Americans to hold the radical left accountable, saying there is simply no substitute for the police.
My administration will be working to remove dangerous offenders sprung loose by these deadly policies and, frankly, by these deadly politicians. America must be a sanctuary for law-abiding citizens, not criminal aliens. My vision for America's cities could not be more different from the lawlessness being pushed by the extreme radical left. While others want to defund, defame, and abolish the police, I want to support and honor our great police.
Meanwhile, U.S. Attorney General William Barr said the initiative is about classic crime fighting, unlike the recent federal involvements in Portland. Earlier in a letter, 114 House lawmakers asked Barr and the acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf to explain the deployment of federal agents in Oregon. Well, now, the U.S. says it will become more active in the Arctic to counter growing Russian and Chinese influence. In an interview, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said America and its allies have been too slow to react to Chinese and Russian interests in the Arctic region. He said Russians and Chinese have become more and more aggressive in the Arctic. Pompeo said he has discussed Arctic issues with the Danish Premier and called for more cooperation among allies. The U.S. is seeking to halt the Kremlin's Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would carry natural gas from Russia to Germany through the Baltic Sea. China has successfully launched an unmanned probe to Mars in its first independent mission to another planet. China's Long March 5Y4 carrier rocket blasted off with the probe from Wenchang Space Launch Center on the southern island of Hainan. The probe is expected to reach Mars in February, where it will attempt to deploy a rover to explore the planet for 90 days. Beijing says the probe carries several scientific instruments to observe the planet's atmosphere and surface, searching for signs of water and ice. In Cuba, girls are turning face masks into a fashion accessory for their 15th birthday photo shoots to match their party outfits. More in this report.
As Cuba eases its lockdown restrictions, face masks are now becoming part of their quinceañera celebrations. The event is common throughout Latin America and includes photo shoots with many glamorous ensembles. A birthday girl, Sofia Valenzuela, said she had to design her masks according to her outfits.
I designed my 15th and the mask was very important because it marked an important stage in my life, which was the pandemic, which lasted 3 months. So I had to design my face mask to fit with my outfit and for all the colors to work. Apart from combining the colors, it was also for security.
In one of her photo shoots, she poses in front of a Havana wall covered in colorful graffiti, wearing a black top, black and white checkered mini skirt and a matching face mask. Valenzuela has done some of her shoots without a mask and others with, especially in urban areas. While her seamstress says she had to interlace black and white stripes to create material for the cloth mask.
This has been tremendous. Tremendous because I really don't have the fabric, and with the situation of the stores being closed, I can't go to the store to see if I can find it. So I had to innovate. I had to start doing the imitation of the fabric of what the girls celebrating her quinceanera wants, because the girls have to be pleased on their 15th. It is the only time they turn 15. They never turn 15 again, so they have to be pleased.
While face masks have proven polemic in some countries, Cuba made them mandatory in public spaces early on, crediting them with containing the spread of COVID-19. While the country has registered no new case since Monday.
Asia-Pacific markets are trading mixed as investors react to Seoul's GDP data and fear surging COVID-19 cases across the globe. South Korea reported a decline in second quarter GDP, largely due to a steep fall in exports. Seoul's Kospi has fallen close to 1% as shares of major firms like Samsung, LG, POSCO, SK Hynix and Hyundai sold off. The Shanghai Composite, Shenzhen Component and Shenzhen Composite are all losing over 1%. Shares in Taiwan slid over 0.5%, but Australia's benchmark ASX 200 rose fractionally. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index also gained marginally. In football, English champions Liverpool beat Chelsea by 5-3 at Anfield to cap an entire league season undefeated at home. Injured Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson lifted the EPL trophy in a close ceremony after the match in front of an empty Kop. The Reds raced into a 3-0 lead via goals from Naby Keita, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Jorginho before Olivier Giroud put back one. Roberto Firmino restored the 3-goal cushion, but the victors roared back through Tammy Abrahams and Christian Pulisic. Alex Oxlade strike 6 minutes from time put the result beyond any doubt as the champions moved on to 96 points. Chelsea now need a point against Wolverhampton Wanderers in their fixture to qualify next season's Champions League. Inter Milan were held to a scoreless draw by Fiorentina at the San Siro as leaders Juventus moved closer to a 9th successive Serie A title. The result means that Juventus can clinch the title by winning at Udinese later today. Both Inter and Atalanta have 3 games each to play, and the Old Lady holds a better head-to-head record as well as a game in hand. Visiting goalkeeper Pietro Terracchiano was in supreme form, while the Nerazzurri twice hit the post through Romelu Lukaku and Alexis Sanchez. In another game, AS Roma thumped the relegated Spal by 6-1 at the Paolo Mazza to move back into Europa League spot. Elsewhere, Genoa beat Sampdoria by 3-1 and Brescia were relegated after a loss to Lecce by the same score, while Torino drew 1-1 versus Hellas Verona. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.